Great. Hi, everyone. Really happy to kind of be presenting this to all of you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but just a bit of background to myself beyond the stuff that was probably mentioned. I'm an architect by background, and I find buildings like this, pretty inspirational. They could be so inspiring and beautiful, right? But you also get buildings like this. And so the person who designed this building obviously didn't think of the air conditioning beforehand, but there's obviously too much glass added in the first place. So buildings like this can carry a lot of tragedy and irony and basically a lot of ignorance, if you like, you know. And it's this kind of building and this kind of nature in us that, kind of 80% of all the sort of economically valuable things are left out compared to any other industry, right? So a lot of good opportunities are left behind by not thinking ahead a little bit in the building industry, particularly. But if ignorance is a problem, I find preconceived ideas are kind of slightly worse, I would feel. So take this bus in somewhere in Spain, and somebody had this brilliant idea of putting a green roof on top of it. And it sounded like a great idea, but nobody did the numbers on it. And you can see that it was carrying this extra dead weight and all this maintenance and probably reduced the efficiency of the bus as well. So the question is, how do you kind of get past the ignorance and your own preconceived ideas of what is green and what will be the right thing to do, right? Years ago, about 15 years ago, I came across this developer who was building this what seemed on the surface, very ordinary building, right? Sort of, a block of flats. Actually, for people in Singapore, this is pretty reasonable kind of, normal background architecture, if you like. But actually, if you scratch the surface, you can see it has very well shaded windows. It has reflective facade. And even behind the scene, it has solar hot water system. It actually has a sewage treatment plant where water is recycled and sent back for flushing. So a lot of thought has gone in. But when the developer sort of, when we asked him, how do you get your money back on this? It was the trouble is the communication and getting rewarded. Things like lead and certification systems can be quite expensive for this kind of low income household as well. Also to kind of communicate these virtues to the end customers too. So that's what got us thinking a little bit as to, how do you deal with this kind of aspect? And that led us to, for those who know Edge, create Edge, excellence in design for greater efficiency. The idea was quite simple, was really for our own clients, really. We created a tool where you can come in with a building, you can put in some basic parameters. It would immediately tell you how much energy your building will save, will consume, water and embodied energy and embodied carbon as well. And the idea was that, let me quickly, show you another. You can choose a few things on the left-hand side, as you can see, including things that are not intuitive, like reducing window areas, or having better shading or having natural ventilation, simple things like that. You can see immediately in the tool, how much difference you can make. In this case, almost 40%. You can see the incremental cost. And that was a game changer for us, for our own investments, right? And what we did then, actually, as we saw our investments pick up, we launched it out to the market. The idea was to have this tool free. We invested a lot in terms of data collection for different cities so that people didn't have to spend extra on it. We wanted it to be measurable. If you think about that first few examples, if you don't know quantitatively how much you're going to save and how much it'll cost, you're really not going to make the right decision, right? And finally, we had to bring the finance sector to the conversation, which at that time wasn't really engaged. They were mostly looking at renewable energy and things like that, right? So we created this platform for free, edgebuildings.com, and we launched a certification platform as well. And rest was history for us. Actually, we saw our investments rapidly grow over the years. You can see here, we currently do actually close to $2 billion of investments in green buildings ourselves as a bank. And you can see some of the examples. Some of them are with CapitaLand. I just chose a array. We have hundreds of these assets that we've invested in using the Edge platform that brings that credibility, right? But we also got the finance sector, including other MDBs, ADB, CDC, and others, to kind of adopt the standard, to kind of starting to use it. And that also has meant, kind of people like GRESP and ICMA have also started to adopt the standard. That's really kind of brought a lot of momentum behind this and funding behind this as well. We're obviously pretty pleased with it. And this chap, P.S. Jayakumar, who was the developer here, is also happy. He's got a certificate. And not just that, we made sure every homeowner gets their own dedicated certificate. The idea was to enable a mortgage market also to pick up, right? And I want to go into that a little bit. Essentially, projects like this were being built. This was in South Africa, where the developer had half the projects that were not EDGE certified, that didn't have some of the green features, and half the project that were EDGE certified. And with that, we were able to measure the difference in energy consumption. What was mind-boggling is we had predicted about 33% savings using EDGE, but actually there was some sort of a social effect, perhaps, that led to even higher levels of saving. Almost up to a 1 month's rent was being saved by the tenants and the developer in combination. And that really meant that, as more developers got to know about this in places like South Africa, more and more banks started to get interested. And that led us to do our first few investments with banks. Bank Colombia was our first. We did a green bond specifically focused on the built environment. They started to issue green developer finance without any concession initially. They used their own funds to kind of do this. Our role was to finance them, but also to kind of help the developers get to know about the bank's product, right? And that's really, as you can see, the amount of projects. And within 4 years, we had a huge scale up, a spike, actually more than a spike. It's still accelerating. Today, about 35% of all buildings in Colombia use the EDGE standard. And it started with one bank. And today we have 5 other banks that also offer this. We have almost, I believe about 500,000 homes are certified in Colombia using this method. And not just for homes, but also for other building typologies, right? I wanted to share this because I want to take this to the next step of where we are going with our work. So this is kind of really important, I feel. It's not just the finance that matters, it's the messaging as well, right? So one of the key things we try to do with our banking colleagues and their clients in terms of the banks, we want to make sure there is a clear product in the market that customers can find and know more about it, because it's half of it. It's about educating people about the cost savings and the greater good that comes with it, and also the discount or any such benefits that they might get. You can see some of these examples from all around the world that we've financed, and this has been many banks that have used this platform, and not just with EDGE, but others. We allow other rating systems also to join that are approved by us as well, right? So this is the story of us taking it from a design issue a little bit and a developer-led issue, connecting it to direct financing, and then connecting it to kind of intermediary financing as well. The last step of this was to connect it with the government, all right? So we encourage government, try not to do physical incentive, but really try to see how there could be ways that government can do their push. In countries like Peru, you can see bonus density number 2 there. Huge amounts of projects got certified and the whole momentum without too much financing that was required, just because the developer got one extra story on the building if they met the green building standard, things like that, right? So that's really the kind of, so we need a way. EDGE experience showed us that, if you can show quantitatively what difference it makes, if you can bring finance to the table, if you can get the banking sector engaged and the government, you can really start to mobilize a lot in this market. And it's been quite a nice journey. Still a lot of work to be done in the built environment. But the question we were asking ourselves is, this is great, many buildings don't make a green city, right? Many green buildings don't make a green city. So how could we take this approach and apply it to making green cities happen? That was the question we asked ourselves about 5 years ago. And we started to explore, what's happening in this space, right? And what was interesting is that we did a survey of about 100 cities and later on many more. But what we found was there was no perfectly bad city, neither was there a perfectly brilliant city either, right? So each one, there are many that have very interesting experience and examples to share with others. But it's very difficult for city officials to know what is going on and other innovations that are happening around the world. But also they don't really know with the bus rapid transport system work in Lucknow, right? Or with the e-rickshaws work in Bogota. So that's something that we had to kind of think about how to make that thing work, really. So And also your vehicles quota in Singapore has been a great inspiration to kind of how to restrict amount of cars on the road, right? Kind of give policy ideas. We were thinking maybe thinking about planning ideas as well as investment ideas all mixed together so that a city official has a clear idea of what are the sort of things other cities are doing using evidence-based solutions, bringing it to this. We squeezed it into a tool like Edge called Apex. It stands for Advanced Practices in Environmental Excellence in Cities. And basically, the concept was similar in the sense that it was data built in. Many of the cities, we have about 350 cities inside the tool. And the idea is that it's a starting point. So when you engage a city, we would collect more. But broadly speaking, this tool allowed us to have a conversation with the city where we could help them come up with long-term climate action plans, or what we call green city action plans, because we feel, especially in emerging markets, making this more about resource efficiency and water efficiency and security and things like that is much more relatable for them rather than climate related action plans, right? So that's one, but also kind of helping them think through how much it'll cost. What is the bill to take it from where you are to a 50% lower carbon emissions? How much will it cost? And then thinking about, how do they compare with other cities? And I'll show you some examples of our work in this space as we move forward. This is a project, one of our first few ones in South Africa, where we worked with the city of Ekurhuleni, which is just basically the adjacent city to Johannesburg. And they had about 200 ideas they were grappling with. And we used the tool and workshop kind of environments, working with the city officials to identify about 20 actions that can help them reduce the energy use, reduce private transport as much as possible, reduce waste to landfill, and make the city more water secure, right? And we worked with them to pick specific things that they could action and get done, right? Whether it's a policy action or an investment action. And we put that all in a report so that the city can then share it as their mandate with the citizen. And essentially what it allows us to do is to take all of those ideas that you see on the left-hand side that the city has picked up. This is another city in Manila, Quezon City, where they've identified, a bunch of ideas, whether it's rainwater harvesting mandate, or having a solar rooftop program, or having a waste recovery platform, making sure that there is a connection to how it can be mobilized, how can it be financed, right? And helping the city official think of this not as a long list of things that they have to deliver, but in terms of bundles that they can kind of get their head around, get a kind of a strategy around this, and also kind of identify where they can get funding. This is really what we realized is actually this was an important part, because sometimes cities might land up financing things that might actually be done better by the private sector. And they don't, at the cost of not doing things that they need to focus on, right? So things like that. We also focused on getting the private sector, which a lot of you are from, engaged into the city conversation. Let me explain. So, getting developers into the conversation of how do you get solar rooftop going or green buildings going in the city. How do you get a property linked finance structure where a customer can borrow money from the bank and pay back through a slight increase in the property tax? That allows a long-term security. I'm just giving an example of the kind of things we were looking at, right, in this model. This has been really amazing. We've done about a dozen cities in scaling this up and trying to link our own financing and other financing in the space. And I'm sure my colleague Victoria will talk about this further in the panel discussion. Just wanted to end it with one last idea, which I feel is critical to make this work. Most of the conversations around greening built environment and greening cities has been traditionally a project finance related aspect. But what we're beginning to see, and it's really promising, is the sustainable linked finance instrument, which I'm sure CapitaLand is well aware of, and we helped finance your first hospitality CLF years ago. But essentially bring this to the cities. This city, Helsingborg in Sweden, managed to link their GHG commitments as the main KPIs as a target that they will achieve. And based on that, they would get a slightly better interest rate whether they hit the target. That trajectory is really meaningful, because $100 million invested in a city might buy you a couple of sewage treatment plants, right? But if you can give them $100 million and ask for a trajectory carbon reduction, it allows them to think a little bit outside, right? Think about how do I get carbon reduction happen and use the money invested in things that they can actually really prioritize and use. So kind of detaching the use of proceeds with uh, with the investment itself. I think we can get a much higher bang for the buck in this space. And we feel Apex, again, could have a role. We're beginning to integrate this into our SLF models for cities, where we feel, if a city has committed many actions, it could be on the building side, on the waste side, on the water side, we could agree on the trajectory. We could agree on what those actions might be. And based on the actions being delivered, the city could get slightly better interest rate, a step down in interest rate, for example, right? That's the kind of thinking we feel that we really need to mobilize the cities to move forward. Now, stepping back, I was saying many buildings don't make a green city, but just having a city aware of what the problems are and what the actions need to be is not enough either, right? So we really need to get political will. We need to get, obviously, the finance mobilized and the technology being there too. But I think where I feel some of this the event can perhaps discuss a little bit is how do you get high level leadership to buy in over a long period, specifically in the government side, but it could be beyond this on the financial institution side, but also on the private sector real estate side as well. How can we get citizens behind this? I think, if we feel we can ram this through, I think it'll be quite difficult, especially in emerging markets where awareness has to be raised in this on this subject. But this is something that we are thinking about. How do you get private sector to participate more in making the city green? That's something we would really like to look at ourselves. And then how do you make sure cities deliver the commitment? They kind of they start off things and then sometimes they go off on a different pathway. How do you get them on target? And finally, how do you take it from a few exemplary cities to thousands of cities? Because that's the scale we need. Given that 70% of all carbon emissions happen in cities, that's the sort of urgency we need. Thank you very much.